Oh, that's oh my God. Got your automatic reply, Lily?
I'm in a meeting all day.
Is that just what it says? I'm in a meeting all day.
Yeah, it says I'm in a meeting.
I'm in a meeting today.
With limited access to email.
Oh,
That's as
okay.
far as I can get.
I haven't got Facebook yet.
Yeah.
Think like back in
I was muted. You can talk now. I think back when I didn't know that automatic replies, like that you actually could see an automatic reply, like that went on for quite a while, but I didn't understand that.
You didn't know that other people could see your automatic reply?
No, I didn't know that like the person who sent where the automatic reply was sent, that they could still read the email.
Oh.
Like I thought for some reason it like stopped the email.
Oh, which is what it should be.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was like,
honestly.
that's actually exactly
Hit
what
me
it
up
should
when
be.
I'm back.
Yeah.
It should be like, nope, sorry. try
Resend
again.
it.
Yeah.
That way you don't come back with like 6,000 emails on your vacation.
There's some hilarious like auto responses that are like, I'm absolutely not gonna read this. So please resend it on the date that I return.
Yeah.
You know, under no circumstances am I ever gonna read this email you sent me.
Return to sender.
That's what I should
what
start
Return
doing.
to
when I go
sender.
to
File away
the
message,
jail.
that's what it says.
I know, I feel like you almost have to be like, no, seriously, I'm really on vacation. I'm really not checking. Like,
Yeah,
go to this other person.
yeah, because people just expect you to,
It's not a fake vacation.
Not a
I'll
fake
check this
vacation,
once
yeah.
a day.
Exactly.
that's what all my vacations are, but, I'm trying to work on it. Mine are like a fake vacation, I'll check this 15 times a day.
Are we all back? I think we're missing Chris. Maybe we lost him. And I'm not sure if I know Shelby was going to be in the room. I'm not sure if she's there, or we're waiting for her to join on the phone or not.
She'd love to have, she got some advice. Okay, I'll go over it. I was gonna ask for your advice.
Is Shelby in the room or no?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll give it another minute.
Why it's calling me unknown user? Unknown user, sure, it's unknown.
Oh, sorry, it was.
go to your room.
You're good, Diane, we haven't started yet.
Who's sitting
Um,
there?
She did.
Elizabeth.
Oh, where's she?
Oh, is Amy in the room now?
I sure am.
Okay, hi Amy.
Hello.
And Shelby did time.
And Shelby has found a parking spot, so will be here very soon.
Sounds good. Should we give it another minute or so and start right at 1?
Sure.
Okay. Jubilee, I wanted to let you know I have to pop off for a little bit at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So I will be but I'll be returning. I have a meeting from 2 to 3, but I'm gonna try to join between 2:15 and 2:45 or so, or to 3 o'clock, so I can be gone during a portion of our break.
Okay.
Oh, and we're recording. I'm so glad that you all captured my sneezing on the record here.
Part of history now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okey doke. It's totally something my grandmother used to do. Channeling her.
Mm.
She had a thing on her wall called Around to It.
Around to it.
She's like, I got around to it. And I feel like whenever I think about that, I think, actually, I see the genes.
Should we go ahead and get started? Are we still waiting on folks?
We're still waiting on Shelby and Elizabeth, but I expect they'll be along shortly.
So I think without Shelby and Elizabeth, we have 8 people. So we do have a quorum. Why don't we go ahead and get started, and then they can join us when they're ready. So I am gonna, Jubilee, can you or I can mute the room. Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay. Looking at where we left off here, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Under program requirements. So under this first bullet point, I feel like we kind of all sort of landed in the same place, and it made sense for the language that that Nicole suggested. The only engaging with a state agency or state contracted service provider, I think, was the point of confusion. So I guess that's maybe where we should start. And I am curious, Lily, from your standpoint, if it makes sense to expand this, or, I mean, we've heard from Brenda around her thoughts related to this maybe not being as inclusive to End Homelessness Vermont and possibly VCIL. But so I guess I think that's probably the place for us to pick up on this. If anyone's talking in the room, you're on mute.
I just wanted to say I did use those two examples, but there may be other organizations that it would also include. So I want to make sure that the meaning is to have it include like specialty services that provide either overcoming of barriers or case management around housing.
Okay, understood. What do we want to say about this? I guess that's the question. Is there agreement in the room, like how to remove the, oh, go ahead.
Text just a little bigger.
Yeah, sure.
Here, zoom in. Thank you.
Is that better? Okay. So where are we landing with this? I think that the language specifically that there's a proposal to alter is with this statement specifically.
Yeah.
Which is also, I mean, this is just not what the rule is currently. So, like, I don't.
This is what I took from the chat from Nicole, that Nicole had in the chat. I copied and pasted this.
Sorry, I'm looking at the old thing. I don't have my glasses on. So are we looking though still at the bulleted list, or is this?
We are, but we're looking, I mean, this relates to the approved housing case management. So this is the definition that kind of aligns with that. So I've added that into this bulleted list from the chat.
Got it.
Staying away from language though, like legislative language or rule language, if the recommendation is that they engage in coordinated approved housing case management, it could be other specialty services that help remove barriers, and it doesn't have to actually consider rule or legislative language would be one way to handle that. Because I think that's rule language.
Well, that's what we're trying to define, is how do we get to your point?
Right.
How do we?
Right,
how do
that's
we
what I'm
say-
saying. I'm saying if the recommendation were to be more simple, like just to say engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management, and can include or should include disability and other specialty services. that help overcome barriers and housing, as well as housing case management, so that are related.
And or approved housing case management, which should include okay, Sarah beat me to it.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you know what? Let's do this. How does that feel to the group?
The only thing I would either take out the, can you hear me? Sorry. I would either take out the, what's too much moving? For example, obtaining or say, or include, disability services in there.
I don't want to be specific. I guess I'm not as supportive as being specific to a particular subpopulation. I think to your point that it's not that we want to, you know, that it could, that it's specialty services inclusive of any specialty provider would be my suggestion.
The for example part, I just, in terms of, it's not just like official overcoming hurdles. Sometimes there's mental health or health hurdles that have to be overcome, I guess is what I meant to be saying there. So if you had, the example could include disability, mental health or health barriers. Or that's what disability would include it. You know what I'm saying? So for example, obtaining, identifying documents, social security, birth certificates, or other health or mental health or disability. I would use disability hurdles, but.
I mean, I think
Or
if
take
you
that out.
focus more, Sarah, on like, this is Lily, the activities versus the service provider. Like, what are the activities that you're looking for people to do? And if you just say agencies that address barriers to people's housing
Yeah,
and don't get specific on type of agency or type of barrier, 'cause that's what you're trying, like behaviorally, that's what you're trying to get at.
yeah, I agree. Thank you, Lily.
All right. So how do we feel about this?
Well, I don't think.
I think it's
Well,
opposite of what we want.
yeah, that's the opposite of what
I think it was more about, I don't know, maybe Lily, what did you say? Say it again.
remove out the
How would you write
example.
it?
And also not having like activity shall include completing coordinated activity. Okay, that's.
I mean, I guess I sort of think that the activities do need to be specific because later on in this document, we do talk about the responsibilities of like, you know, coordinated entry and, you know, related as they relate to this. I mean, I think, what are you opposed to, except for adding specific specialty service providers by specialty here, what needs to be altered about this statement to have it read what you're wanting it to say?
I think, Sarah, if you take out just state agencies, state contracted or specialty services, so you're just saying engaging with providers too.
Okay.
I think that's what,
I don't know.
people were thinking.
I think it was more,
So that you're not specifying the type of provider, but instead you're specifying the fact that like with the provider, you're working on your housing.
I do think that the examples are pretty limited though,
yeah, that's,
like,
So maybe just take out the examples.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's too hard to like have like a couple there, but there's way more.
So
The
removing
challenge-
this piece,
Yeah,
Amy, is that what
the
you're suggesting?
Again, I think from then an implementation perspective, it just becomes, you know,
If you're not,
more challenging, but
Yeah.
I appreciate people, you know, the sentiment behind it, but I think that's where it becomes like, you're trying to get someone to say like, you know, we want to hear from you, or what are you doing? And you leave it open, like that in some ways it's just like hard to then manage as a benefits program.
that's why I was suggesting not using language, but saying engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management. This, if it could say or I don't know, I'm a little uncomfortable with the way the language is, so I'm just struggling to figure out the right way to do it, because overcoming the barriers that are not examples there are part of housing, getting to housing. And so I think it's approved housing case management and or overcoming barriers. This should include specialties or approved or whatever. If we just left it at that, then we could in the legislature talk about language. But right, so if we just said engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management, or working to overcome barriers.
Well, I mean, housing case management I think case management should be housing focused for people in a shelter program. I mean, they can be working with other, they can be working with, you know, on other goals that a household might have for sure. But like with regard to this particular, you know, the component of housing focused case management seems to be most applicable in this case. So like the requirement wouldn't be that they're working with it, you know, with any case manager on, you know, any particular thing. The requirement would be that if they're working, that they work with a case manager and that there is a housing focused piece of the work that they do with that case manager. Now, what that looks like, Brenda, to your point, could be anything really, you know, related to housing, but like, I don't want to narrow it too much here. I worry that say, you know, that engagement with coordinated entry and or approved housing case management, if we expand that to just, you know, any case management that doesn't necessarily have a housing focus on it, then how will folks move into permanent housing? And maybe like I also want to be mindful, like, I don't think we need to like think this or talk it through if we have the gist of what needs to be included here. The room's muted again, so I don't know if someone's talking.
I think the challenge with that is that sometimes the leading to where you can work with an approved housing case manager is overcoming your barrier, like health, mental health, disability, other types of barriers that don't have to do with directly at that moment with housing, but they get you to the place where you can do housing case management. And if we're doing a people-centered or whole person approach, then that is going to sometimes be the first step to getting to the housing piece. And that how you get into housing is overcoming that barrier so that you can actively and in a meaningful way engage in those other services. Sometimes you have to overcome whatever your experience you're having. It can be a lot to ask of somebody who's in the middle of, for example, a psychiatric crisis, that's the requirement to stay in shelter, if really what they need to do is address their psychiatric crisis before they can do that part. Which just brings me, I guess, back to why I don't agree with, we're gonna have some kind of requirement. And so I'm trying to figure out where the flexibility is, because I don't necessarily, just fundamentally think we do better with robust services, but not required services. But if we're going to do this, then it needs to include that access to disability. Obviously that's our focus, but there's other barriers that come up for people as well.
I'm going to suggest that we table this because I do think that this is, we get at this down below around AHS and its contractors, and we could speak to other agents, other, you know, specialty agencies here. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, I'm just saying that we've spent like 45 plus minutes at this point, maybe almost an hour on this particular thing. So I'm gonna ask for specific language here, or for us to table it and go ahead.
Frank has just has his hand raised. I know
Oh,
it's
I'm
hard to
sorry, I
see
can't
on
see.
the screen. Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
No worries, Sarah. Thanks. I'm just wondering if I'm understanding correctly, what Brenda's talking about in the context of disability is kind of a little bit broader in terms of things that are required under federal, like there's already other kind of, I guess, federal statutes or federal rules that may require certain things. And so I'm wondering if it would make sense, like, as just a way to kind of figure out if there's consensus, like where we have just like a global like language that just kind of reaffirms federal requirements somewhere in here, and it's just kind of all in one place, and it just reminds us, in addition to what we're doing, there's other requirements or things that the state needs to do with specific subgroups, if that makes sense.
Frank, I just want to make sure, what federal requirements are you referring to?
So this is an area where I don't have a lot of experience, but Brenda was saying, I think before, around the accommodation language, that there's equivalent federal rules or federal laws. I don't know what the authority is. And so if it's the case where there's things where there's like equivalent federal requirements, that we just note that somewhere.
Federal requirements related to case management?
Sorry, Brenda, is this where you were talking about the accommodation language?
No, that's not for the reasonable accommodation language. Sorry, Frank.
Okay.
No, it's just making sure that it includes that.
Okay, sorry, wrong section. Sorry to get us off.
Okay. So how do we want to proceed with this bullet point? Okay, I guess we'll leave it for right now.
Yeah.
Let's move into the next bullet point, which is monthly income certification with ESD. Does anyone have feedback or thoughts on that?
I have talked about this before. I think we should move away from doing it monthly. I know renewals for homes is something that, you know, ESD does with hotel owners at different increments, and this is why it was done on a monthly basis, but this is a really onerous process for people who are trying to overcome poverty and just become stable. And I think really unnecessary. So I would like us to see with some kind of interval that is much larger than monthly, to reduce staff time, and reduce barriers for people in hotels and the service staff who have to help them kind of go through this process.
Are people certifying monthly right now? How is that happening?
Right,
Yeah.
right now, it can be up to 28 days based on legislation. So the majority of households do get 28 days, so almost monthly. The majority of income is monthly income, so SSI, SSDI is our most common source of income. Anyone who gets paid more frequently on a weekly or biweekly basis has to reapply at every point they're going to get paid, so we can calculate the income contribution.
And the hurdle of that is that it first of all takes up, I mean, the whole time can be very long. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. It takes up quite a lot of time that could be used for overcoming other barriers to housing. And the income contribution kind of penalizes, the way that's done is kind of penalizes people for working because they have to do it at every paycheck. And so if they're waiting, and if we did it every 3 months, for example, every 90 days, then that would leave a lot of space. I mean, the activity, I think that most people in this room know, of maintaining benefits is actually quite a lot of work and takes up quite a lot of time. And so I think it's really important to, I'm going to support Julie's request or recommendation.
How
So the
does,
recommendation-
sorry, go ahead, Molly.
Hi, it's Molly. I just have a question. So it's a recommendation to have it be a 3-month income certification? Is that what the alternative is? I didn't know who's recommending.
Yeah.
Jubilee, is that what we heard?
That's what Brenda said, and I'm fine with that. I think just moving to some longer interval, you do an income certification and establish it as kind of their average, and then unless there's, if they lose their job and request one, that's kind of what we use for their next renewals, which will help reduce agencies, department staff time. It will allow our case managers and people who are providing supportive services to actually work on housing with these folks rather than just trying to help them renew, which is what happens. It's kind of a constant cycle and you can't actually do anything else. So 3 months sounds good to me.
Is anyone opposed to the 3 months or 90 days recommendation? Okay. Moving on next to income contribution. We have heard a couple of different recommendations around income contribution. This is one that we talked about last month. There's also this recommendation around no income contribution. There is a recommendation around income contribution that is identical to the Section 8 calculation, income contribution calculation. And those are the recommendation here, I should say, was for households above 200% of the poverty line.
I just wanted to say that our recommendation isn't quite that. Our recommendation was to give the legislature two recommendation A and B, which I think is also what, I don't know where you landed up with the HHAB group, but, and A and B, A was no income contribution with an option to save, and B was income contribution, but done not the same as HUD. It was, that recommendation was amended. And it is in this, what I sent you, and I think, I don't know if it's in the package, I can't see it. But it's in what I sent you, and it creates some standard adjustments instead of using their HUD's definition. It's detailed, laid out in the recommendation. I also sent the packet I sent you plus the ones that I handed out here. For us, that was after the research. I'm uncomfortable with it. I mean, I guess where did HHAB land, Frank?
I think we're similar to you in terms of not having not having true consensus on option A or option B. And so our recommendation too is to have both go into the recommendation and be presented to legislators. So the option A would be no income contribution. Option B, 200% total poverty level and not required to pay the 30% wage.
I think, yeah, I just want to make sure that I understood what you said, Frank, because I was in that meeting too, and there's such an echo right now. Okay, so I heard, so at the HHAV group, I think the group was pretty divided, half and half, around half of the folks feeling that there should not be an income contribution, and the other half of the folks supporting an income contribution as outlined in this particular bullet point right here. This recommendation around 200% of the poverty line, a 30% contribution has been recommended by the VCAP agencies, and that's why it's there. We also talked about an income, if there was an income contribution, 50% will defray the cost of the motel stay, as it does, well, all of it does now, and then 50% of the contribution will be placed in a savings escrow to be returned to the household when they exit the program. Some of the concerns related to not having an income contribution from shelter and service providers was that in their experience in the past, when there wasn't a length of stay requirement or cap on motel stays, is that households would turn down housing when offered it to them because they could continue to stay in the motel for free. And I think that their concerns were largely that we saw a pretty significant rate of evictions related to folks not having to pay any of their income while ERAP was available, and then once ERAP ended and households had to begin paying their full portion of their rent, that we saw dozens and dozens of evictions, at least in Chittenden County, when that happened. So I think for those reasons, the shelter and service providers are advocating for an income contribution, again, for households over the 200% poverty line, and for half of that to go into an escrow.
So I think that makes sense. I think the one caveat is I'm not sure if there was, like, I know there was a division between the group around no contribution or the 200% level. I don't know if there was like consensus within the folks around the 200% level, if it should be all to savings or part to savings to offset. I think that's where there was less, at least I don't know if there was like.
Okay, understood, Frank.
I don't think we're gonna be able to, there's a lot of recommendations on the table, and I know, like, I think a vast majority of us agree that we need to reassess the income contribution and what that looks like. I don't think we're gonna come to any sort of consensus on how to do that. I suggest maybe we keep it very high level and suggest that income contributions need to be looked at, and maybe even list out, here are some of the ideas that are being circulated in this, in this industry. I don't know, that's weird to say. But it's something we're all discussing, and there's no clear answer or solution, but it is something, and then leave it up to the legislator, where again, all of these groups and people at this table and the people we're representing will have an opportunity to present theirs. But I think we could spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about this, and we're not going to get anywhere. So I'm wondering, perhaps instead, that is a path forward around this particular bullet point.
I'm amenable to like removing our recommendation and going with that.
Frank,
Or
Hampton?
So yeah, no, I agree with Jubilee. I mean, I think it'd be great just to say that there were strong arguments to be made for option A, and there were strong arguments to be made for option B, and there wasn't. I think that's something the legislature should look more. But I think giving them that framework of option A and option B, with that caveat.
Can we take a sort of a straw poll on that from folks who agree to, it sounds like the recommendation is to submit as part of this report that the income contribution, we were not able to come to consensus on, and these are the two options that were presented to the task force.
I think first, let's take a vote and see if I need to drink more coffee, how to frame it, but really, like, whether people agree, like, there needs to be a change from the current status quo. And then from there, I think we can vote on that, whether folks agree we need to look at the income, or the legislature, we should direct them to look at the income contribution, and that the flat 30% of the income is not what we recommend. And then from there, I think in our report, we just include all of the, I don't know, it doesn't sound like there's any one that that has a majority. So just kind of listing, these are some of the income contribution models that are being talked about and considered in our state.
Are we sure that we don't, I guess we haven't heard from everybody around this piece. So that's why I guess I'm suggesting, like, is there, like, we heard Frank and Brenda and myself, but like, I guess, like, where do we stand as a group on this? I think I just want to make sure I understand.
Just landing on what it is.
Sorry, Amy, we were muted.
Oh.
Start again.
A straw poll makes sense as long as we know what we're straw polling on. So I think you said it, that we, this group believes that the legislature needs to look at this specific item, and that here's a list of the things that were being considered. Like, just keep it really simple.
Yeah.
And I agree. I'll say at the table, since I haven't weighed in, I agree with this, and I think this is a good way to do it, and keeps us from spinning our wheels for the next hour.
I agree with Jubilee's framing and idea of keeping it high level and including the ideas we're having, but it doesn't seem like we're gonna come to a place of voting on it.
Thanks all. I know Elizabeth, Lily, and Nicole are still are also in the room. Could you weigh in on this? And then Chris online?
This is Elizabeth. I agree. I think it needs to go to the legislature. I don't think that we should try to make one recommendation.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Oh, I said thank you.
Oh,
Lily or Nicole or Chris?
Molly was gonna.
This
Oh,
is Molly.
Molly.
I agree. Yeah, no problem. I also agree with what Elizabeth just said.
And Laura agrees with what Elizabeth just said.
Chris would like to echo that. Lily or Nicole?
You know, not surprisingly similar to other, you know, like I think we just continue to feel that we're not able to kind of give a firm yay or nay based on some of the lack of analysis that like we would need to do that from just our position within the administration. So I think the sort of same would apply here. It, you know, in some ways, I think a lot of this just feels like, it, you know, needs just more analysis or detail. And again, I know we're coming from like a very specific administrative place with that. So I think similarly here, we would have to abstain from then giving even two suggestions to the legislature or giving sort of, so I don't think that changes like our position.
Yes,
So
I agree with
Lily-
Lily. It's hard to look at the components.
Okay, so I mean, are you all from, you know, as part of the administration, are you just abstaining on all of this?
I mean, I think we can see how discussions continue, and I think we can see what the report says, but I think, you know, we shared last meeting that like things like the budget analysis, things like seeing this holistically kind of prevent us from taking an alternative stance.
Okay.
I think I'll add to that, you know, capacity is a real challenge, and every piece that we're looking at actually is expanding and expanding and expanding who potentially is eligible. And so I worry about that because I see how many people we're turning away each day and each month. And so by continuing to grow the program, it makes the people who can't be housed that are eligible even larger. So I think that's another piece of the budget and just who's eligible.
I mean, I think this is kind of a larger conversation, but just because we're not housing people or we're having to turn them away from this particular shelter system, doesn't mean that like the challenge of homelessness disappears. And I think that's like, you know, it's like whether we shelter people, you know, within this program or within community shelters or whether they're unsheltered. I mean, I think we're always going to kind of run into, you know, that piece that we just, and I think that shelter analysis, you know, capacity assessment that's coming up as well will, you know, certainly highlight some of that for us too. But I mean, I think you're right, Nicole, you see the people that you have to turn away. And I think that that's, you know, consistent with shelter providers turning folks away, you know, every night too. So that's just, I think speaks to the lack of shelter capacity in general. And I include the, you know, motel rooms as shelter capacity in that as well. Let's look next at the last two bullet points.
Brenda,
Oh,
Brenda
go
has-
ahead.
I
sorry.
think I did the motion to vote on Jubilee's high level, because we haven't voted on that, to vote on directing, making a recommendation to direct the legislature to look at the income contribution and that we don't support the flat rate 30%, and then include the different ideas that have been presented. These are some of the ideas that have been presented.
Oh, I wasn't thinking that we needed a vote because everybody went around the room and said that, and agreed and said the same thing. But are you requesting a specific vote for that?
Yeah. If we're gonna include it, right, we need to vote on it.
Doesn't hurt, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay. All right, so the recommendation is, to recommend a change, or to advise that changes to the income contribution need to be made. And to include, the two ideas that this group talked through, one of them being, no income contribution, and the other being, the 30% related to, households that make the, 200% of the poverty line. Right, correct? Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and call the roll.
I don't think that was the recommendation. I think the recommendation was to keep it high level and just say that that we recommend the legislature looking at the 30% income, that we don't support the flat rate income, and these are the ideas that have been presented. We're not specifying which ideas are the ones that we are preferencing. We're just keeping it high level and putting the ideas on the table.
I thought that's what I said.
I think you presented the two ideas that two of the recommendations, but there's other recommendations that have been presented as well. And so I think that's why we need to keep the vote high level.
So we would include in the report any recommendation that has come up around the income. Is that what you're saying?
That's how I understood Jubilee's, yeah.
I think we just go that way, otherwise we'll have to take multiple votes, and I think it's just the easiest way, and then the administration will have time to weigh in on, what that analysis in detail, in the legislative session. So I think that's just the way to proceed now. That had been what my suggestion was.
Okay. So based on that, I'll go down our list. Brenda?
Yes.
Jubilee?
Yes.
Nicole?
I'll abstain.
Chris?
Yeah, I think spoke up for a second there. I just need like the question repeated because I don't know which half we're on. So the
Okay.
motion.
Okay, so the motion is to direct the legislature to have more conversation about the income contribution, that the current 30% of income contribution should be changed, and then to include it, or should be revisited, and then to include the recommendations that have been discussed during the committee.
Yes.
Molly? The room's muted, sorry. Whenever we talk online, it's so loud, it's so echoey.
Yeah, yes. I don't know who was getting it, but yes.
This is Molly, yes.
Lily?
Abstain.
Next is me. Yes. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And Shelby?
Yes.
Okay, did we miss anyone? Okay. So moving on, let me just pull up my screen again here. So the next two bullet points are must accept shelter placement that meets household needs in the community when offered / available, and must accept housing placement that meets households' needs and is affordable and supportive when necessary. Anyone opposed to either of those? The room is muted. I think I see somebody's hand up.
Here you go. That goes against the Olmsted decision, and so I would have to vote no on that. The
Which-
Olmsted decision says that it must accept the housing placements, that it says meets households' needs, but in the past that has been used, there would have to be clarity around that for me to vote on it, because in the past that has been included, nursing homes and treatment facilities and all of those things are not legal under the Olmsted decision, which prevents people from being forced into placement. And so unless there was some caveat around that, I would have to vote no on that.
Do you have a suggestion for alternative language?
I would not include that language. I mean, I think I would vote no on this anyways, because I have a lot of questions, like who defines what meets household needs? How do they address that if their needs aren't met? I just have a lot of questions around that particular requirement. And I'm seeing some things that are not working for people with disabilities right now. And so I'm with these new family shelters. And so I'm I would have to vote no unless there was some more clarity.
Okay. Other thoughts from folks?
Where did this come from? Is this already in there? Where did this language come from?
I think the gist of it is already in there, right, Nicole?
Yes, I was looking for the language, but there is something in the language now.
Does it read that way? Okay, I wonder if it's a bit more supportive than.
I think I agree with Brenda that I would probably vote no, just because the way that's written, and I have questions, and I mean, that meets household needs is generally like, yes, that's what we want, but if it's left up to interpretation, then that has not been good for households. Like, for example, we had a client go look at an apartment, would have met their needs, but their daughter had been abused from someone right across the street. So really, that was not a good option for them. And so like in that case, if they didn't take that, then they would be penalized for it, when really it did not meet their needs or was not supportive. I also just don't really get that means, and it is, I guess I don't really understand what supportive and when necessary means in that.
I think so. I actually wanted to include this piece around affordable and supportive when necessary, because I think that the current language really just says that they must accept a housing placement when it's offered to them. And I think my thinking was wanting to make sure that it's affordable and a supportive environment when those supports are required. I think the goal of that piece is to soften a bit, just any random housing placement that's offered. Is someone talking in the room?
Yes. There's just some
Sorry.
security stuff that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, they're readying the building and doing things. I can
Oh, okay. I guess I just,
I found the language as it currently is in the law that when it was passed, this past spring, kind of, I can read that if that would be helpful. This is as acted. So folks kind of know what the current, standard is. Oh, now I gotta get back to it. It kind of mentions it in this one, notwithstanding any rule or law to the contrary, the department shall require all households applying for or receiving general assistance emergency housing to engage in their own search for and accept any available alternative housing placements. And then that's like the first kind of mention. And then a bit further down, if the department determines that a household at the time of application or during the term of the household's authorization has not made efforts to secure an alternative housing placement or has had access to an alternative housing placement, the department shall deny the application or terminate the authorization at the current authorization period. For purposes of this subdivision, alternative housing placements may include shelter beds and pods, placements with family or friends, permanent housing solutions, including tiny homes, manufactured homes, and apartments, residential treatment beds for physical health, long-term care, substance use, or mental health, nursing home beds, and recovery homes.
Said staying with friends was in there.
Yeah. No, it's not the house bill. But no, yeah, that part changed.
I'm wondering if we removed the residential treatment, mental health treatment, and nursing home type options from that list. If that, how you all feel about that?
We still have seen, like, I'm gonna give the example of the person who was referred to one of the family shelters and has an autistic child. We're struggling to get a reasonable accommodation for them. They were not given the opportunity to do something else. To return to the hotels in December after they have used their 80 days because they're at the family shelter, but that is not a good setting for a person with autism, but we're having a really big challenge. So I'm going to use that example with the must include. And then part of the reason that I'm adamant that there needs to be reasonable accommodation language in here somewhere. And then the other example I'm going to use is just in general, creating that must requirement does things like somebody gets offered an apartment, but the apartment is in an area they don't feel safe, or they were offered an apartment, but in their opinion, it's like somewhere they do not feel good or comfortable. It's like completely taking their ownership away from their housing process if they turn that down, and they maybe they're turning it down because maybe they feel it's going to be too small. And I just don't like that requirement. I think that we want people to end up in shelters. We encourage people to end up in shelters when there's an option for it. But when it isn't going to work, we also want them to have protection. And I think from the VCIL standpoint, there's been enough problems with this language in general that I would probably still have to vote no. I think that's what they would want me to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Brenda. I think the must language is too strong in this case. And also the Olmstead rule, I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing. Like, I don't know if we soften it, make it a little more flexible. I don't know how to do that without spending a lot of time on it. Take it out or reference the Olmstead rule and say that these bullets need to be looked at and, shifted based on the Olmsted rule, et cetera.
Where we could go high level again and just
Yeah.
say.
I actually really
Oh,
like
yeah.
that
Thinking that too.
suggestion that these,
Yeah.
these criteria need to be relooked at, and then again, gives folks opportunity to create recommendations for the legislators, for the committee.
Yeah, because then you could have people in to testify around this and what they've seen and.
There's legal, implications
Yeah.
of this, so,
Yeah.
you know, that is the kind of thing where, you know, we would, at least in my committee, you know, our chair would have had, you know, the attorney general would have the lawyers in, to talk to us about it, because it is, there are implications
Yeah.
there that, could really affect our state.
So I can make a motion to vote on, to have it be a high level again. So our recommendation is the legislature look at at that requirement around, taking or around accepting alternative shelter and housing, to meet, needs and legal implications, right?
I would name the Olmsted decision.
Yeah, to meet the, both the needs of people experiencing homelessness and the requirements of the Olmsted decision. And for those people that don't know, Shelby just asked, so some people don't know what the Olmsted decision is. The Olmsted decision basically said that you can't require people, there's several things in it, but one of them is you can't require people to accept placement in treatment facilities or nursing homes, or if their preference is community-based living. And it also said that that people have the opportunity to reject up to three housing units in any kind of required or low-income housing that by their own definition, not by someone else's, doesn't work for them. That's a general high level.
Okay, so this is the comment that I've added in here. We're voting to take the high level, or to provide a high level recommendation that the legislature look at the requirement around accepting alternative shelter and housing to meet the needs of households and review by legal to ensure compliance with Olmsted. Does that capture it? Okay. Let's call the roll here. I'll go down my list. I'm going to go down my list in reverse order just to mix it up a little. Exciting, I know. Shelby.
Yes, sorry.
Or no, whatever you want, but you know we're voting on.
We're voting to,
Oh, it's not up
that
there.
this one is high level
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
Okay, so yes. Sorry.
Frank,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
myself, Sarah, I vote yes. Lily,
Abstain.
Molly,
Yes.
Chris. Oh, I think we lost Chris. Nicole,
Abstain.
Jubilee,
Yes.
and Brenda.
Yes.
Great. Okay. What's next here? Next, we are going to be talking about length of stays / days eligible. There are a few recommendations here. I am going to, actually, Jubilee, do you mind, facilitating this piece? Because I know I'm gonna have to jump off in a few minutes to hit another meeting and then I'll be back.
Okay, yeah, let me figure out where I have that open. 1 second. Okay, there we
Oh, Frank, I see your hand up.
go.
So on this piece, I don't know if it makes sense to request that we get us to December. We've been trying to work with the CA and a few other folks to figure out if there's a way to kind of understand like a very data centric or kind of average length of stay based on the best data we have. And so I think we're close to having that number, which I think would be helpful to ensure that whatever decision we make is based on the kind of best available data. We just don't have that today. So I'm wondering if maybe we can talk about it a bit today, but push the vote to the next meeting when we hopefully will have that, or we will have that data.
Testing.
Right, can you just clarify what data is being pulled and on what? I just am confused about the data that's being pulled.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been talking with ICA about how to potentially figure out based on like the data like we pull for the entry, and to understand like if there's a way for us to use the data sets that we have to understand like the average length of stay between when someone becomes unhoused and when they become housed. And it's a bit more complicated than I think we originally thought, because there's just no kind of clean when you go to A to B to C in the data sets. And so it's been kind of trying to think through different ways to approach this. And so we think we have figured out a way to do that, but I just don't have the data yet. And I will soon, like before the 10th for our next meeting.
Thank you, Frank. I was confused when you said average length of stay. I thought you meant in a motel.
Oh,
You
sorry.
mean across homelessness as a
Yeah.
whole. So that you clarified. Thank you.
Okay, so how do folks feel about that? If we are, do you want to have the full, do you want to discuss some now? And then finalize things, wait completely until we have the data?
Can I ask, not to put you on the spot, Shelby, but I know this was a really important piece to you, so how do you feel about waiting until?
Yeah, I think having that data would be very, very helpful.
Okay. Okay, well, then we can wait to have that full discussion then, and then move on to notice application and appeals. Too many papers.
I do have it. That's the wrong one.
We have some, is this yours?
The amendment represents, no, that's wrong, I'm looking at the wrong thing. But, I had it more, here it is. Benefit award letter, programmatic changes, notification and communication. It doesn't matter. Okay. So should I just present it?
Oh, here it is, okay.
Yeah.
So this is what we've kind of discussed so far, and then there's additional recommendations. determine like a notice, application and appeals process should be clearly defined, minimizing discretion of HS currently has to develop rules for program execution and implementation, and they should be provided in writing to any household. Households will be entitled to continued motel stay until there's a resolution of the appeal process, if applicable. Letters from ESD must include clear instructions for appeal, contact information for legal services, and participant rights related to reasonable accommodation. And households may apply either in person or over the phone. And a mechanism for virtual application, income reporting, etc., will be developed by ESD, the app, portal, etc. And protections must be in place and developed by the Vermont network to ensure households that, and we already talked a bit about this, but also making sure that, if they were to experience domestic violence during a motel stay, to ensure continued eligibility. And then we get in, Brenda, Shelby, and Amy had some additional recommendations that we've kind of discussed, but.
Yeah, some of them were included in that, but the benefit awards letter might have some of the same things, but it's easier for me if I do it this way. That they receive a benefit letter, and households will receive a benefit letter, will be notified in writing at each recertification of their benefit, time remaining if applicable, recertification date, and any additional requirements that they need to complete. All households will be given adequate time while remaining sheltered to meet any documentation requirements, and ESD and AHS field services coordinators will provide to the local lead agency any known providers and any known providers for the household notification for the 6-month review date. And this, we didn't vote on that part yet, so that's part of the day limits. Then the programmatic changes, any changes to the program itself or benefit will be noted with no less than 30 days notice, so that the household has a chance to both prepare and appeal decisions related to emergency housing. And that requires the legislature also to make decisions so that that's doable. We understand that. And denial letters, a denial letter should be issued at denial, and should a denial letter not be issued, then there will be a 10-day grace period of shelter to allow notice of the denial to the household, because we have experienced on several occasions a denial letter actually not being issued, even though it is in the rules. And so we want to make sure people have that access. So those were and then on the appeal piece, we already have the remaining sheltered, and at the time of denial, not only the right to appeal, but households should receive information on how to contact all organizations that take new applicants for referrals specific to representing or supporting applicants through fair hearings, because there are 2 organizations that I know of that do it. And we want to make sure that people have access if, for example, legal aid is not able to take them, that they know the other places they can call. And then some detail about that that includes their name, contact, the organization's name, contact information on that denial letter, so that households can access available support. Okay.
Any thoughts, comments about any of these? I think if that's what we decide to do, we could easily. Those are kind of amendments to what's already there. But yeah, any thoughts about any of that? Let me know if you'd like me to scroll up or down to see something. Or I can,
Looks like some of what's in the bulleted recommendations, additional recommendations, is mentioned in the first paragraph.
yes, that's why some of it we've already talked about, and then I think these were written, so I think they would be pretty easy. I don't know if we want to just go through each like overall topic, like the benefit award letter first, and please chime in, folks, if you have thoughts around this.
In the first bullet, if we're talking about benefit award letter, I have a question about whether we would include AHS field services in here. It just, it's apples and oranges a little bit by having field services director to them for GA, which is a DCF program. I know we're a subset of AHS, so that's just one question. And then, I don't understand the 6-month review, so I guess I look at that piece and I don't know where to start on
I
that.
think we can,
That's part of the day limit.
this whole sentence, I think we can ignore. Is it okay if I delete that out?
Yeah, because it's part of the day limit conversation. So unless we, what we do with that. But I did want to say just about the AHS field services coordinators currently tells, but like when we're having a major transition, they will tell providers who is exiting and what hotels, lead agencies. And so they may be different departments, but they are the same agency. And it is possible to, and we have seen it done frequently, to actually have some communication across the board so that people are aware.
Yes, I know what's happening right now because I give them the list every Tuesday morning to share with the field. So I'd rather see it charged to ESC, and if we work with field services, it's easier. It just, when you start directing different places, it's too easy to lose something.
Oh,
So I think again, like behaviorally, what do you want to see happen? Maybe don't focus on like
Yeah,
who you want it to be
that's
from.
fine. Yeah.
That makes sense. So it makes sense for it to be ESD, I see.
ESD. Or it could be, whatever.
Okay, so, I took out that particular section pertains to something we haven't talked about, that households will receive a benefit letter and will be notified in writing at each recertification of their benefit time remaining. Why am I cursor keeps disappearing? Time remaining. Next, recertification date, and any additional requirements that they need to complete. All households will be given adequate time while remaining sheltered to meet any documentation requirements.
What's adequate time?
What?
What would adequate time be?
Well,
I'm just worried.
Yeah,
that it
yeah.
could-
no.
Now it's like somebody's discretion.
Well, right now, they're sometimes not given any time to get documentation requirements in order to get, so there is this 4-day provisional housing, but if you're, for example, trying to be a healthcare provider to get a disability variance form filled out, 4 days may not cut it. And so I think that it probably would depend on the documentation that's needed, but often, I mean, they use discretion all the time, just to be clear. I think that there is a possibility, for example, to say like, hey, I've called the court, I'm not gonna get my eviction paperwork for 10 days. They said it's gonna take 10 days to be delivered to me, so I need that much time. And there's ways to, in other benefits, not necessarily in our state, but in other federal benefits like housing, there are time limits, but those time limits are flexible when we can't get the documentation.
Can we put some kind of language like that in this so that it's not just this open, somebody's discretion? I can just see how this could go off the rails.
Yeah, I could say.
Yeah.
2 hours is adequate time.
Yeah.
You know, 2 years. Yeah.
I don't think 4 days is adequate time, so if I were to suggest a time, it would be 10 days. And it would, which most,
Especially if it's something that is like verified documentation, I think should probably have a little bit more time than, like, if it needs to be signed by or filled out by your doctor, or if you need something from your old job saying you don't work there, like, those are the ones that I see take more than 4 days. And they don't take like weeks to get usually, but I
Although
agree.
medical providers sometimes.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but I think
If you said 10 days with, and can be extended with, I guess with documentation that it will take longer because, or with verification that it will take longer. But I also do think that these kind of things impact 211 when we're having these, just because those 4 day, they like sometimes land on a Sunday and then 211, and then everyone's trying to get a hold of 211, 211 can't possibly return those calls, then we're getting all the calls and it
Well,
just.
we don't do verification, we don't do
Right.
written verification and things like that.
Right.
We house until the next ESD
Right.
release day.
Can I add to, I don't know if it goes here, but some recommendation I'd like to add to this is that, things like provisional housing or that, renewal dates aren't on a weekend or a holiday. Cause that. Nicole can appreciate that.
We could add, no, I mean,
Everybody
a lot of
appreciates
times,
that.
you just add that if the renewal date falls on a weekend or a holiday,
Yeah.
it will be bumped to the first
Following
business, following,
Yeah.
As a whole, ESC tries not to renew on a weekend. I actually think one of the problems right now is that 12/1 is a Sunday. And
Yeah,
the law changes on 12/1, so that's not a ESC
Yeah,
thing, but,
yeah.
yeah, we always try not to end on a weekend.
Mhm.
But sometimes the hotels don't give us a whole lot of options there.
I liked your language.
I was also really happy to see that there were a couple like weekend days that ESC was still working because of what was going on with the program. But
Okay, so, so how do folks, what language are you thinking would be to put in here, around this, all the adequate time?
I think, 10 days and can be extended with verification that is necessary to extend, like, for example, if you
With
need the documentation or verification. Like, if you need a doctor's appointment or as a court said, it's gonna take longer to get the document. Because otherwise you have to like know a lawyer who can go to the back channel and get you it really fast. Which I know you.
It's like my cursor disappears, so I can't see where it is. It's this weird thing.
Mine too, but I'm always like.
It's
my
only,
cursor
only
working?
while I'm sharing.
Oh, gosh. What do we have now there?
Instructions would be given 10 days
Yes.
while remaining sheltered to meet any documentation requirements. With additional time allotted on a case by, or how would you?
If such documentation will take longer.
The verification.
Verification that such documentation will take longer.
Okay. And then I think we can slip in the other language change you talked about not happening on weekends and first down into this next section. So let's hold off on that. How do folks feel about this? I can read out loud if that's helpful.
That is helpful.
Okay. Households will receive a benefit letter and will be notified in writing at each recertification of their benefit time remaining next recertification date, and any additional requirements that they need to complete. All households will be given 10 days while remaining sheltered to meet any documentation requirements, with additional time allotted with verification that such documentation will take longer to obtain. And again, we'll worry about grammar later and commas.
That sounds good to me, to look at my co-recommenders.
Yeah.
I do wanna add,
I am realizing we are supposed to be taking. Oh, no, never mind. I am not over. Reading lots.
if we are slipping in something about not having renewal or like due dates.
We're gonna talk
Oh,
about that.
Okay.
That'll be, yeah.
Okay.
We're not talking about that yet.
Yeah.
I think
So that 10 days does include weekend days, right? I would assume.
No, well, we can figure it out in the language, I think.
Generally, like when you're doing that, you either say 2 weeks or 10 business days.
Yeah.
So, is that what you're
Yeah, she's
thinking?
like 10 business days.
Okay.
I just know the disability variance forms are like,
Yeah, they're hard.
yeah,
Actually,
and
we're
then
saying-
sometimes they have to be done again or updated, and then doctors are like, I already did this, and we have to type it. It's a whole thing.
Okay, Chris, I see your hand up. Sorry if I missed you. It's hard to.
No, don't worry
Share.
about it. Don't worry. I just barely turned it on. So the question I've got is the denial letters that we're discussing here for appeal. Are they simply for recertification of benefits or initial benefits?
I think it goes for both. Recertification of
Okay,
benefits,
so-
initial benefits, reasonable, like you said,
Because it goes for both, how is that impacted by the emergency rule, which allows both the town service officer and the field services director to deny benefits if they believe that an individual has come to Vermont solely for benefits? Because the emergency order is clear about that denial, authorization for denial is if in the opinion of town service officer or field service director, people can be denied service if they come to Vermont solely for benefits. I don't believe any appeal process should affect that. It's in the emergency order and I think it's appropriate. So I don't have any language to offer to affect that, but if
Right
it
now,
affects,
we're just talking, Chris, right now, we're just talking about that bullet point that says benefit award letter.
correct,
haven't
but
gotten-
oh, we're not at appeals yet? I thought we were all talking the appeal process.
No, we took like a bigger look and now we're just looking at that bullet around the benefit award letter.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Any other folks online want to chime in? Okay, any thoughts from the room, or do you all want this from a motion?
I would make a motion, to adopt this version of this recommendation language, above, for benefit letters.
I'll second.
Thanks. Okay, let me. Too many windows, 1 second, folks. Okay. We'll go through, okay, we'll start with, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Okay, Lily?
Abstain.
Okay, Nicole?
Abstain.
Abstain. Jubilee, say yes. Brenda?
Yes.
Shelby?
I do have one question, sorry. The recertification date and recertification of their benefit, is that also renewal? Like that's the same thing?
The recertification, yeah, I think,
it said certification and recertification.
I think it's a term that needs to be defined.
Yeah, that's what, because
yeah. There's
So-
the term, I think renewal or certification and renewal.
Certification and renewal is what it should
Yeah.
say, yeah.
Okay,
that way if someone doesn't get a letter about
And
renewal,
I-ROSE,
then.
then-
Okay, so then,
okay,
yeah.
we'll have to start over.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Next
No,
renewal
it's okay.
date, certification, or is it?
Time, next renewal, right, because it's no longer recertification, it's a program, not a benefit.
If this becomes a program, then it would be recertification.
Okay.
We don't need to worry about language.
True.
Ah.
True that.
And again, this can be fleshed out in the legislature. Okay, we'll start that over. We changed it. Does everyone understand the changes we just made? Okay. Okay, start again. Sorry, Monica. Elizabeth,
Yes.
Lily,
Abstain.
Nicole, Jubilee, yes. Brenda,
Yes.
Shelby,
Yeah.
Molly,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes. Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Okay, Sarah's not back with us. Okay, anybody I missed? Okay, I believe that was 8-2.
821, right?
What?
821.
Yeah, 8-1, yeah, well, but, yeah. Okay, and then, how are we on time? 27. Okay, let's, just stop here and then we'll take our break. We're gonna take a break until 2:45 and we'll all come back, okay?
Great.
I will mute the room, and we'll see you all at 2:45.
out how it's being done. It would make so much more sense.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So joined us. Nope. Okay. We can pick up where we left off. Getting into the programmatic changes, I just think this is a really good spot to put in that, to add in, well, first we can address this part. Any changes to the program itself or benefit will be noticed with no less than 30 days notice so that households have the chance to both prepare and appeal decisions related to emergency housing. Yeah. This one is a little tough because of our budget and the timeline of when we pass it and often pass it and when the fiscal year starts. But I do believe in it. So yeah, I mean, and that is something the legislature would have to contend with. Do you want to say anything more about this, Brenda?
Nope, I just think it's, we found that it's necessary for people to have quite a lot more notice than they're getting right now. I think that this is not, I do think sometimes that DCF delays those things, but I also think it is sometimes the legislature. I don't think it's like on any one entity. It would be more our state doing them overall in all bodies, doing a better job of planning so that people can have that notification.
Any thoughts about that part? The GCF, PSD perspective. I think this not only benefits the households, but also I know service providers. It is really hard to scramble with like a week's notice and
Yeah, I guess I should add that this partially came for the households and also it is, I, as a provider, and I think probably all their providers would say the same, this is not sustainable for it to go this way for like constantly. It feels like I'm always operating the fire drill. Our organization is always operating the fire drill. We don't know what we can and can't do, what time frame we have. And I usually have earlier notice than most providers because I'm always participating in the legislative process. And so, but still, even then, I feel like I'm operating a fire drill. And I imagine that's what other providers share as well.
Is there a time frame currently? That's
No.
less than this, or just no time frame?
No time.
Okay, specified, okay, thank you.
oh, here, let me scroll. So is it readable on the screen? Oh, yeah. Okay, it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just around the change in state fiscal year of like, and the budget, so I don't.
It's BAA too. I mean, that's where we have had
Yeah.
problems is BAA, because it's not just when it gets passed, it's when it
Yeah.
gets signed by the governor, which is
Yeah.
what a 10-day lag, there's time.
Right,
There, yeah.
It
It gets passed and then it's got to go through and, the speaker's got to sign in and there's a lot of people and then everyone can sit on it for a little bit, which just adds more time. So yeah, it becomes a challenge.
So is there like a realistic or a more realistic, like 30 days might not work, but is there an amount of time that would work? Like considering all of that?
I mean, I feel like, well, I don't know.
No, I was gonna say, it just really depends, because on July of 23, June of 23, the
Yeah.
budget got vetoed, and so the veto session happened in late June, so we had like 2 days to stand up rules, and we didn't have a choice, because it was in law.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it's not really ESD in DCF, it's.
Right.
The
Yeah, and
legislature
What
would have to
about,
put that
I'm
into effect,
wondering,
basically.
you know, wherever possible, but then, you know, this speaks to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also to individual households, if they're suddenly going to, lose their benefits or no longer
Yeah.
qualify if they're already in. So I think there's, you know, there are, I think it's an important thing to keep in, because I do think there are some narrow, ways where we can still ensure this gets applied.
Can you say more about that, how it would apply to a household that's already in?
If
it
they're
wasn't a legislative
in,
change?
let's say they're in, and then it passes and in 2 days, they're no longer, we change the eligibility
Okay, so
requirements.
it's still. a
And
legislative
they
change.
no longer qualify,
Right.
giving them a 30-day notice to,
Yeah. I
to
thought you
work.
were saying there was a scenario where it wasn't a legislative change, and I was trying to figure out what that scenario
Oh,
was. So now I
no,
just-
yeah, so I'm just saying, I think there are it's something that we want legislators to be aware of, because I do think, like, in those kind of, there are scenarios where we can make a difference, especially when a household is gonna be negatively impacted and is in a current stable situation.
So there
So
is
I
a way,
wonder, oh,
sorry.
well, I wonder if then this needs to be just more specific in terms of what you're getting at, and like, so one, you know, I feel like there are some things that may not be about like the rules or eligibility, but may just be like some guiding assumptions or guiding values or introductory remarks. And I wonder if one is just naming that like program changes over time, over the past few years, often year to year, is just challenging for everyone involved, most of all families. And that, you know, the hope is that this legislative session, there's a plan put in place that would be like an ongoing plan and not just, you know, so in some ways I feel like maybe having a statement at the beginning that talks about the intent as it relates to this.
Mhm.
And then I think specifically here, what you're really kind of talking about is like supporting a plan around around the change in fiscal year, and maybe needing to call that out specifically so that there's intention. You know, again, you sort of run into some budget issues there, but like, otherwise I just worry that this could be misinterpreted or just like, oh yeah, if you're gonna make, because really what you're talking about is a state fiscal year primarily.
Well, I think really,
I didn't, but was this, I think
know.
this is one of your bullets.
yeah, I think it's more like, around if a family is going to lose its benefits, then, like, if a household will lose benefits, they need to have, is that a better way to say it? Does anybody know? I mean, the reason I like this is because it gives the legislature the freedom to explore this, in the way that it's able. But also it does put a little more onus on the legislature to do this and the administration to sign things. If someone is gonna remain in the hotel because they didn't sign it, or the legislature held it, or whatever, then that will be clear in this. It puts a little more accountability on the state around these programs. And I think we talk a lot about accountability for for individuals who are suffering, but I think it's really important to talk about accountability for the providers and for the state as well.
Yeah, again, though, I just want to acknowledge to Julie's point, there's like, to the scenario that was just described, there's not much done that
Well, there's nothing
can be done.
much that has been done in the past, but I think that the legislature, I mean, there is moments, but there's ways, as Julie said, to influence that. So they can say, then somebody would not lose their benefits for 30 days if the law is not passed in that timeframe, in the appropriate timeframe.
I think this could, it's not, yeah. I mean, I think this could be wordsmithed to also include, you know, when legislative deadlines, I mean, you know, when the legislative process results in days or weeks, you know, taking care to ensure that folks whose eligibility may change, have adequate time, yeah.
It's like,
Frank?
what's the mechanism by which the legislative process doesn't negatively impact families? Like, that's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. Frank, I see your hand raised. And welcome back, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I see Lily's point here. I mean, I think the problem previously was that the eligibility kept changing, the day limits everything just kept changing, the amount, and what we're trying to do with most of the substantive pieces that we've already discussed is kind of creating what should be our recommendations for kind of a permanent program in place, which I think makes it so we don't necessarily need we're in a different posture if we're creating this program with these kind of pieces in place that creates continuity. And obviously I see the point around the legislature is going to have to appropriate every year, but that's, I think, a separate issue. So I guess I see Lily's point of not necessarily if we were kind of making that kind of policy statement of this is you're creating this system, these are the recommendations, we don't want to have confusion of people not knowing what, how long they're eligible, if they're eligible, all those pieces, and that's being addressed with our recommendations, and therefore we don't necessarily, this becomes almost like a moot point.
I don't know if it does because it's, the situation still come up where someone is suddenly going to lose their benefits and they will have, now they have 30 days and the legislature could change it at any time too. They can change this too, I guess, but I'm just saying that I really think the acknowledgement of the importance of notice to families, the legislature will likely change this, but it's a way to I think this conversation is incredibly important, and that's why I would like to really advocate for this being in there.
Yeah, and I think you can do both. I mean, I think to my point earlier, I think it can be in some sort of overarching language at the beginning, and then I just think maybe it needs to be a little bit more detailed so that folks can follow it and do the intent of
And reading this, any changes of their benefits, so then renewals would need to happen more than 30 days before, because that would also, if this, let's say we put this in, then the renewal for, let's say they're due for a renewal December 1st, in order to generate that 30-day notice, they're gonna have to do December 1st renewal would have to be performed in, they'd have to start performing it in October.
Unexpected changes of benefit? Unexpected changes of benefit? If you already know that this is the end of your renewal date on the day that you, the end of your certificate, just like when you get food stamps, when you get EBT, the end date of your EBT, and you either renew on that day and then you continue to have EBT or in time, or you don't renew and then they give you 15 days to correct anything. I believe it's, well, it depends on when you do it. But they give you till that, the end of that month to correct anything. So there's actually a model where that, what I'm talking about, recently experienced it. So there's a model there where you miss the certification, you miss a renewal. I'm going to use myself. I missed a renewal for EBT. I was public meeting, and in my life multiple times. And then they give you a period of time. You have until the end of that month or the end to actually fix it before you actually get cut off of it. So they do give you time in other benefits too. And so does Section 8 and lots of other benefits.
I think they do, that's actually, it's really because you're still in the appeal, and so they're letting you address it during the appeal. But you do send notice 30 days ahead for that, specifically.
Is there another way to write it that would be?
I just think it seems that is implied by that, which is why I really liked Lily's suggestion, or it doesn't have to go at the end, but I do, just rather than giving a recommendation of how it does, maybe, note that it's standard in pretty much every other benefit or program to give at least 30 days notice of a
Okay.
major change. I just think we would need to do a lot of tinkering because it seems like it's just a sentence, but there is a lot that's at play in that sentence.
I'd be okay with that. I think that like that, noting that it's standard in any other benefit, to give at least.
And then I think we also note the, and actually I really like that, how we're trying to move away from this kind of benefit to it being an actual program, and how these constant, how that affects, obviously these households themselves, families, children, but how it affects the administration and the people who are having to do this work, and how it affects our service providers and is resulting in burnout. So I think as much as we can move away from this every 6 months, drastically changing the benefit to really an established program, which is kind of minor changes here and there, is going to be really important.
So, yeah, I think if we noted it differently, like the way that we just said. So, other people have questions, I can make a motion to. You ready for that?
Just if you're not on mute.
Let's see who it was.
Yeah.
Does anyone, is there any more discussion or thoughts? Motion?
I will make a motion to, under programmatic changes, to say that it is instead, it is standard in other benefits and programs to give 30 days notice when a benefit is going to end or be removed. Leave it at that. I'll just add that so that households have the chance to both prepare and appeal decisions related to such benefit or program.
I'm trying to type as you're talking, Brenda. Can you just repeat that? It is standard in other government programs to
Give 30 days notice if the program or benefit is going to end, so that households have a chance to both prepare and appeal decisions related to such benefit or program.
Got it.
And then Sarah, just so you can update your documents, so we don't have like multiple documents with edits, I'm gonna put in the chat the language we approved in the bullet ahead above that one, under benefit award letter.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry to have to jump out, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, and I think Nicole kind of said, maybe she didn't, I'm losing track of like which conversation, but there's a lot in here of like, that'd be a huge shift to run this basically as an entitlement program. And so there's just a lot of implications for that, and a lot of implications for the state in terms of acquiring risk, just I think even given the fact that there's not, the limited rooms, I don't know how that would play with like the legal benefit.
Yeah, my brain's going down.
I
It's a
know.
whole different system that we would need to build, because if we're talking 30-day notices, then we're talking about adverse action if people are closing and giving them time. It feels like an entitlement program as opposed to a benefit program, and because they're just structured differently, but my mind's just thinking about all the possibilities here.
I was going to second the motion. Brenda. Then,
Um, but my understanding is we're trying to move towards a program and not a benefit, but should we just,
Sarah, can you share your screen now, your back, just so we can see what that language looks like?
Yes, I can. Can you all see that?
Type out what you're saying.
Yeah.
There we go. Can you make it a little bigger,
Yeah.
please?
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
it says program or benefit, so we're not deciding that in this one.
Lily, I'm wondering if you can, how do shelters handle this kind of situation?
I mean, in most cases, shelters are, well, I'm trying to go back to programmatic change. Is this because there's programmatic changes though, or just, right? Because that's the category we're on. So it's programmatic changes. So if the program's gonna change, so then a shelter, you mean like if a shelter was like, we were a family shelter, now we're a single shelter, like their programming's changing?
Yeah.
I don't know if we've had some of the, I mean, I'm just trying to ground myself in like what section we're in to see if there's an equivalent. And I'm not sure.
Or like if a shelter's gonna close down, I mean, they're usually giving clients, like I think about seasonal shelter, you know, people knew the day that we were closing from the onset of the season. I know that's not like apples to apples, but I'm just wondering if there's like, if we want to try to, to the extent possible, mirror like a shelter program. I'm just wondering if if you have any insight into that.
I'm struggling to like think of an equivalent programmatic change where it would then end. You know,
Are
I
there
think
standards for like in the HOP grant for like how long people have, like if a shelter is going to close or, you know, whatever, how like the notice that they need to give to guests?
nothing comes to mind. I mean, I could check, I think.
I mean, I'm sorry, not to like be the annoying one, but I don't necessarily know that it matters. Like, we might not be able to come up with an example. We're trying to find ways to change what we currently have to better serve families and individuals. So I think it's less about, I mean, it'd be great if you had an example like, this is how we do it. It works really well. We should like make it this, but in like the essence of time and what we have to work through.
Yeah.
You know, I was just trying to answer Sarah's question. I don't.
No, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to argue. I'm just saying like, maybe we move on if we can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be worried because honestly, I'm gonna tell you this, we talked about this a lot and did the same thing in committee and then just moved on because in reality, the way our budgets work, the way this works, that's not gonna be possible and the legislature isn't gonna put it in. So that's why I was suggesting Lily's is just that reminder, wherever possible, we do that. We, you know, kind of, I think it's good to remind the legislature that these are people's lives and these last minute decisions are really hard to navigate. But I don't see a path forward unless we do make that shift to a program. But I just think this is a lot of wordsmithing about a thing that is.
Right. I mean, I think it's the discussion is important in the legislature. That's why I think it's important to make the recommendation. But the way that we have it written, it's not that we're not recommending they do it. We're saying what the state, what we think would be nice. And that allows for some conversation about where it's gonna be possible, whether or not it's in the, you know, and maybe somehow making it so it's not 2 days notice or 1 day, you know?
My only thinking around asking about shelter programs is that it would, if that was the case, it would strengthen this language to align with best practice with other shelter programs. So we don't need to talk it to death. That was just the context for which I was raising that.
Yeah, I understand that. I just figured, it just seemed like we were like circling around, and so it's like, oh, this, we can't think of something, that's okay.
Okay, so are we
So
voting?
there's still a
on
note
this?
in the budget.
What was that?
Oh, are we voting on this now?
Sure, yeah, I mean, a motion was made.
And seconded.
Was the motion to approve this or to put this language in to advise the legislature?
Yeah, that's all.
Just to
Yeah.
make it known?
Yes. I understand the reality of it.
I missed a lot of discussion and I would in no way expect anybody to recap for me, so.
So, yeah, just it's an advisory to the legislature.
So it's not the standard in government programs to give 30 days notice.
Can it say in standard and other programs?
Says it is
So
standard.
that's different than
Yeah.
just kind of saying
Okay.
changes are
Rule
hard for
changes.
people.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm unclear what,
I think that
is it the language is on the screen or is it something else?
it is.
I'm
I think
wondering if
should-
we change, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I guess
Sarah.
I'm just wondering if we change this to it, you know, best practice dictates that programs give 30 days
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it's just an advisory.
Well, I mean, all of this is just.
Yeah, right,
recommendations.
exactly.
So this is gonna be under then programmatic changes. It's not necessarily just like an opening value.
No.
Okay.
So Brenda, you're okay with that friendly amendment?
I am okay with your friendly amendment, Sarah.
Okay, and Shelby, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amy?
Do you want me to call the roll?
Sure.
Okay, Shelby,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
myself, Sarah, I vote yes. Lily,
Sorry. Abstain.
Molly,
Yes.
is Chris online?
I believe by phone. No?
He texted me that he
He
was.
texted me too that he was on, joined by phone.
It looks like he's dropped off now.
You could.
Okay, Nicole,
Abstain?
Jubilee,
Yes.
and Brenda.
Yes.
Okay. Jubilee, I'm not sure where you were with the,
Yeah, so we had, we're realizing, so we just skipped to the additional recommendations, first, because a lot of them feed into, under notice application and appeals, because they kind of filter in. I think the first paragraph and couple sentences before those bullets are seemingly more value. So I figured, whereas the bullets are kind of the details, so I figured we were going through the bullets and then we can look at plug that into the kind of that first big paragraph. One thing that came up in our last discussion and we weren't quite sure where to put it, I kind of thought it since we were talking about days, but we had talked about making it so that renewals, if a renewal happens on the first or on the over the weekend or on a holiday, that it be bumped to the first business day following. So we're not in that awkward position of trying to process renewals on a holiday or the weekend.
Like, for example, next Sunday.
Like December 1st.
Yeah. For example.
But so I don't know if we want to we seem to have consensus about that, but we didn't have a big discussion around it yet. So I don't know. First, is there anyone who is opposed to that?
Like, yeah, we're talking about the renewals on the weekends.
Yeah, and holidays.
So I mean, when I'm reading this document, renewals and hotel authorizations kind of seem like two different things.
Okay.
And so I can't, like, just adding a couple of nights to hotel authorization isn't possible without talking to the hotel.
Okay.
So I'm not sure in practicalities that is going to make a whole lot of sense. I understand what you're trying to say, and it would work like for 3 squares. If your research was due on a Sunday, then you could have it due on Monday. But when you're talking about a hotel authorization, it's a different thing.
Well,
Because the hotel has to agree to keep the person.
right, but but if the renewal date, the renewal date is generally, sometimes the hotel says only take it 7 days, take this person for 7 days. So that would be different. But if their 28 days is up on a Saturday or up on a Sunday, then bumping it to the next business day is the department's, can be the state's policy. And then obviously hotel owners are always often in the way of things. And so I think that if this is when the renewal dates that are dictated, maybe you could say renewal dates dictated by by ESD.
I just don't think we can do it automatically without, it's a training thing. It shouldn't be happening now unless 80 days falls on a weekend, but I just don't know how we do that because it's not us, it's a private entity.
I mean, but you call, right? We call, you guys, I mean, ESD calls the hotel. And so you are saying, can we certify this person until this day?
Yes.
And then if this would be the department saying, can we certify this person until the 1st? But we know the 1st is a Sunday, so can we certify this person until the 2nd?
And they may just say no.
They might say no. I mean, I'm saying that I can show you training material to say staff should never hire somebody on a weekend or a
Right.
holiday. If it's happening in error, except for 12-1, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm saying that I can't force a hotel to take someone an extra day if we do make that mistake.
So you're
What
saying,
about if, are there pros or cons to maybe the echo is so bad, hang on one second. If somebody is set to have their renewal on Sunday the 1st, could their renewal date be set to that Friday? Is that something like, are there pros or cons to that? And then Nicole, my follow-up question to what you just said is if a motel is not going to allow for a renewal on, Monday the 2nd, would they allow for a renewal on Sunday the 1st?
Well, I mean, what if we said renewals? We recommend that renewals if a renewal lands on a weekend or holiday, that it be bumped to the next business day as long as the hotel, the participating hotel agrees for that, agrees. I don't know if I say anything else. What if that's what we said? Then it addresses that issue.
If it says that, is the motel gonna be like, oh, sweet, we can just say we don't agree?
Well,
Like, I'm just
sometimes,
asking,
but I
like,
mean, most of the
if
time.
you have it in there, like, is that gonna be then a way for, I don't know
If
what
they-
it's like to interface with the motels through this, so I can't really speak to like somebody trying to.
If they were gonna do that, then they weren't gonna renew the person anyways, probably, but if it's, I mean, in my experience, maybe you don't want to, you know, my experience is that if they don't want to take the person back, then we have the benefit of the hotel owners telling us ahead of time that they don't want to take the person if they're a client, but if in general, when that person goes to renew, they call the hotel and the hotel says no. But so they probably wouldn't have certified them until the first if they're not willing to certify them until the second. Unless they have like a 7-day policy. There's a couple hotels that have like a 3-day trial or a 7-day trial, and then it's different. Yeah.
Maybe this is something we'll just keep moving along on. It was just something that came up, and we didn't have anything in writing. So yeah, if you want to just move along to the next bullet, Sarah.
Okay, so are we not gonna vote on that language?
We didn't have any, it was just something in discussion that popped up, and I thought there's agreement, but it sounds in thinking more about it, that it was a little more complicated. So I think we can just move on, and
Okay.
maybe it'll get considered later during the session.
Okay,
Okay.
Sorry, I have to go renew the parking thing. I do want to vote on denial letters, so it won't take me that long, but little late.
Let's start the discussion.
Thank
Take
you.
big giant leaps.
I'm sorry.
so Jubilee, which section are we on? Did you already go over the length of stay?
No, we decided to table that discussion completely until we have all of the data.
Okay, got it.
Until next week. So yeah, we've moved on to that notices and that whole section. So now
Okay.
we're moving on to to talking about denial letters.
All right, denial letter.
So
Okay, so let me just share my screen.
we were at the denial letters will be issued, denial letters will be issued then.
So this says denial letters will be issued at each denial, and should a denial letter not be issued, there will be a 10-day grace period of shelter to allow for notice of the denial to the household. I'm not sure I understand this. Denial letters will be issued at each denial, and should a denial letter not be issued, I'm confused.
Sarah, I'm explaining it to you, but on mute, so I apologize. There's an ongoing issue where while that is the department is, the ESD is supposed to issue, the workers are supposed to give a denial letter, that does not always happen, and it doesn't happen with enough frequency that sometimes we talk about incentivizing clients. This is an incentive to actually do the denial letter, and it also gives also gives individuals and households an opportunity if they aren't given the letter, because you need that letter to ask for any kind of help for an appeal. So when otherwise legal aid or End Homelessness Vermont have to actually go access a denial letter if one hasn't been created, and that makes the appeal take even longer. So we're saying the 10-day grace period of shelter to allow the denial notice to the household is basically if the denial letter is not issued in the first place.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but if somebody doesn't get a denial letter, aren't they not denied?
No,
So I think there's a piece that's missing to this, and that this assumes that anyone getting a denial is already in shelter. And there are many people who get denied before they even enter the program because they're not eligible for some reason. They're not categorically eligible. They have income, they have resources, whatever the case may be. So I think you need to add a piece to this because this assumes everyone's already in shelter.
it actually doesn't. So we are also talking about people who are denied and access to shelter. That we need, in order for legal aid, I'm looking at legal aid, in order for legal aid or in Homelessness Vermont to adequately go through a fair hearing process, we have to have a denial letter, and with enough frequency, there isn't one even initiated in their account, in their patent notes, for us to find the document and to be able to adequately represent them in a fair hearing to reverse where we think there should be a reversal as quickly as we need. So this allows then in that situation where someone doesn't get one to have a 10-day grace period of shelter so that we have time to get that letter and be able to adequately represent them in a fair hearing.
So it's kind of like a penalty to the department if they fail to generate a denial letter.
Correct. That is the
But if
recommendation.
somebody doesn't get a denial letter, then how do they even know that they're denied?
They're told. They aren't given a voucher, or they aren't given a renewal. So but we don't always know the reason why. So the reason that they need it, if they are doing fair hearing themselves, or legal aid needs it, or Homelessness Vermont needs it, is because if we don't have a reason unless without that denial letter. The denial letter is critical to their appeal rights.
Okay,
So
Nicole, what would be a reason why somebody wouldn't receive a denial letter?
The most common one that I'm aware of, although there is one generated in our system, is that they hang up. So if someone calls for housing and they are denied, we tell them all of the information, but if they disconnect, then we have to mail that letter. We prefer to email the letter if we can, and we just don't have great addresses in our system oftentimes. I have many hundreds and thousands of letters sitting in an office next to me of people whose mail have been returned. That's been for GA.
But in these cases that we're talking about, the denial letter isn't even being generated, or so because it's not even it's not uploaded, it's not being generated, it's not in their notes anywhere. And it happens frequently enough, and it is repetitively been brought up by legal aid and by us as well.
Staff are trained to issue denial notices.
Right.
I would have to look at an individual case, and errors happen. Errors do happen.
Right.
I'm not aware of a frequent error that's happening around denial notices not being generated, but it wouldn't be in the regular notices system. It is there's a special system for GA and where notices are actually created, the denial notice specifically.
Right. I think the issue is that the answer to your question, Sarah, is it's an error, but that error has real life impacts on the household. So, and it could be a human error. It doesn't have to be but the human error is the people always paying for these errors are the people who are struggling. And what this does, it's not just punitive. What it also does is make it so that the person being denied isn't the one having to pay for the error.
Well,
Because
do we get at that in this sentence here, though?
Yeah, as long as they're offered to appeal, yes. But sometimes if they don't have a denial letter, they don't know that they don't know about the appeals, they don't know to call legal aid, they don't know that they can call, that there's other people that can represent them. The lack of denial letter causes a huge problem.
The lack of denial letter means they don't really make it to that appeals process.
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes
Or
they're
like
asked it, they're
engaging
supposed to ask it. To Nicole's point, they are trained to do those things, but errors do happen, but this particular error happens more frequently than some others. In our experience, and to my understanding, legal aid's experience. I'm getting a nod.
So what we have written up here is households will be entitled to continue motel stay until resolution of the appeals process.
That's if you make it to the appeals process though.
Right, but if they're being denied, they,
Right.
That's for folks already in hotels, though. I think this is also meant to get at folks who are doing an initial application. Am I correct? For housing?
Well, I guess it would also apply sometimes to recertification. It's really about people who are not making it to the appeals process. Because you can't make it, it's very, if the denial letter has an issue, you may not have also been asked if you want to appeal and been given information about who you can contact to help you with an appeal.
so when you're saying somebody applies for the motel, if they're not in the motel and they're denied, but they don't get a letter that they should be able to stay in the motel for 10 days. Oh, I think you're muted. I don't know what happened.
In order to have time to get an appeal, a denial letter, so that the fair hearing process can be more fair. Because
So you're saying to allow them 10 days of motel stay?
Right.
Even if they're not eligible?
Well, the thing is if they don't have a denial letter, they may not be able to appeal that eligibility, and those eligibility does get overturned in appeals. So just because the department says that they're not eligible doesn't mean they are not eligible. It means that according to the department, they're not eligible, and this person is now saying, I think I am, I'd like an appeal.
So this feels like it's gonna get into, this is gonna be impossible to operate, because it's gonna just be a he said, she said. They'll say, we do have the letter, here it is, or I feel like to make this, like, I get what you're getting at, and it's a serious issue, and we do, but I don't think, and then what if they do get through, and then they can't be housed, and then they get through the appeal process. I don't know, this just feels like we would be creating a mess. Well, and I don't see how, like, thinking about like how you create rules and how that, like, who oversees this and enforces this.
Well, I think they would call and say, is there a denial letter issued? What I'm happy to do is bring this up in the legislature, but it's definitely coming back. But we can say denial letters will be issued at each denial with a clear reason for the denial.
Yeah.
And then I can bring up the rest of this with the legislature and think through how that could be managed.
Yeah, I think it's just that we would need to like oversight of this. It's just a very big, again, it's one of those things where it's a sentence, but there are a lot of implications. That's then there's gonna have to be money budgeted for whoever's providing oversight. It's just a very complicated.
Are the other people that made the recommendation, are you okay with that too? Amy, Shelby?
Yeah.
Shelby?
Yeah, I agree. This is really complex.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, I think it's important to say, like, this needs to happen, and I know to Nicole's point that it's supposed to, and it's an error, but yeah, I think it's important to talk about in the legislature.
Yeah.
So we're gonna
So
remove
we're
this
gonna
piece.
remove this piece.
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
think I was gonna
Okay.
say that, reiterate that denial letters should be issued. And then if you go up above, I think just, and then the elements that they should include, the reason for the denial, clear instructions for appeal, contact information, and those kind of things. See, kind of merging those. And then you have one about making sure that all legal services, not just legal aid, are listed.
All services, not just.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we feel like this makes the most sense? So all letters from ESD must include the reason for denial, clear instructions for appeal, contact information for legal services, and participant rights related to reasonable accommodation. Do we agree that that can replace this? Is somebody in the room talking? It's muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
I think the denial letter has to be issued whether or not there's an appeal, so it's not part of the appeal process. My recommendation and my motion is to say that denial letters, that a denial letter shall be issued at each denial with clear reasons for the denial. That's
what it says right here.
That's what it says right here.
That's
All-
what this is saying,
all-
is include clear instructions for an appeal. If
Right.
they want to do one, all of.
But that's part of the appeal, and I'm.
This whole is notice, application, and appeals. This was just a general
Oh.
paragraph.
I guess I just can't see the whole part, so I can't tell.
It's because it's
Um,
multiple recommendations that we're kind of combining and
Okay.
they're on multiple pages.
So do we have to vote on the denial letter part? Or,
Because she is wondering if so what we're doing is we're kind of breaking it into the
Okay.
bullets.
okay,
And so we're trying to create language around what we want for denial letters for us to vote on. And so that's what,
Yeah.
can you, Sarah, Brenda, can you read language out again for Brenda
Yep.
to listen to?
Yep.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Sure.
All denial letters from ESD must include the reason for denial, clear instructions for appeal, contact information for legal services, and participant rights related to reasonable accommodation.
that's fine. Sorry that I just can't see it.
That's okay. All right.
I would keep in denial letters will be issued at each
Yeah.
denial. Keep that part in, and then after that, add in that other language.
Agreed. I need to ask the other recommenders. You guys are okay with that language?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So next it looks like we're looking at appeals, but do we feel like this is captured here? Households will be entitled to continue motel stay until resolution of the appeals process.
Wait, I need to. What am I looking at?
This is around staying housed while you're in a.
So we're just doing part of that appeals process?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as long as in our recommendation for appeals, which was number 9, in this packet, it's between the denial letter and what's up there. I think the main points are, that all appeals should include remaining sheltered until the appeals process is complete. And then at the time of denial, that applicants are given a denial letter that informs them of their right to appeal, and all organizations, so like legal aid, those who can help with an appeal are listed like clearly.
Yeah, it's not just legal aid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And, sorry,
Yeah.
the other part was that that the appeal letter informed, that they don't have to decide at that time. And that's just based on, that sometimes clients don't know, it's not anything that anyone's doing wrong, it's just that.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah,
About,
sometimes that, and that the appeal letter include, I can't read it, that the client does not have to decide at that time. Decide what? I'm sorry, does not have to decide whether or not they want to appeal at that time. I know that there's, it's
So
in this paragraph.
how does that square with remaining housed in an appeal?
Well, that's, if they, just the denial, in our appeal process, it says in the denial letter, they are informed that they don't have to. So when you get a denial letter, you're not necessarily appealing. The denial letter.
So can I read this?
Yeah, I think that's
Word for word, and then, so at the time of denial, applicants should be given a denial letter utilizing the denial notification process outlined in our previous recommendation. Applicants should be informed of their right to appeal and informed that they do not have to decide at the time of denial if they so choose. Households should receive information on how to contact all organizations that take new applicants or referrals specific to representing or supporting through fair hearings. All such organizations should also be named with contact information on the denial letter so that households can access any available support for their fair hearing process. So, and I think because we took out that 10-day thing from denial, that would work. I mean,
yeah.
With the 10-day grace period, I see where your question was, like, how does that work if they don't decide right then? But if we take out that 10-day grace period, then what's here fits right in with that,
Yeah,
the denial letter.
because it's only if they're making an appeal that they would stay sheltered, because it would be through the appeal process.
Do you feel like this is really procedural? Like, I want to make, are we getting really in the weeds around this or no?
The reason I don't is because this has been an ongoing problem, and I think that there needs to be some clear outline. So this is a recommendation about the appeals process. And I know that it's been a request made both by us and legal aid quite frequently. So, and I just think that the clarity around the process would be really beneficial to the applicants, the providers, and honestly, the government.
Okay, so it's clear instructions for the appeal process. Does that cover what you're suggesting?
I would say clear instructions for the appeal process, applicants' right to choose.
The house is closing in 15 minutes. Please gather your belongings and exit the building. Thank you. The house is closing in 15 minutes. Please gather your belongings and exit the building. Thank you.
So I would say, it should be, applicants should be informed of their right to appeal, that they do not have to decide at the time of denial. And the letter should have clear instructions of the appeal process and how to contact all organizations that can represent or support through fair hearings.
Can you talk a bit about you keep talking about that they don't have to make a decision right then? Generally, I haven't seen the appeal letters. You have a period of time that's
It's 10 days.
10 days.
I believe.
I'm just wondering why that's never been something I've ever known someone to be like, oh, I've got to make this decision right now.
I think it's more of, like if, I know some of our clients, if they got an appeal letter and it did not say like, you do not have to decide right now, or you have 10 days to decide, they would freak out and start, like, they just don't understand. So I think it's more, just
Trying to
for,
prevent.
trying to prevent traumatizing people or making them panic,
So are
because
you
they don't understand.
wanting to remove, like, you have 14 days to apply? Are you not wanting that kind of language in there? Because I think that becomes really administrative. That becomes hard for them. Being on the back end of this through multiple kind of benefit programs, that would be a nightmare. There's gotta be.
Can I say what the problem is? The problem is that people, are like asked on the phone, or they get the letter and they think they have to decide that minute. And so they then don't reach out to their providers or legal aid and sort of, and sometimes, like, for example, with the 80-day limit, we multiple times had to go back in and talk to the client and say like, hey, I don't think anything's gonna change in this appeal process. Do you still wanna go forward? And then we had to go withdraw the appeal, when if they had just called us in the first place and asked us that question, but they were like, well, I had to decide right then. They actually believe that they have to, and they don't. And so this is really this is for them. It's not like something that the department or anyone else is doing wrong. This is just a problem that we see. I think it probably is more like people who have significant either cognitive or mental illness, but it is just gives them another layer of understanding what's happening.
Yeah, okay.
I'm looking at the denial notice right now, and it says you may ask for a fair hearing within 90 days of the date of service.
Yeah.
Date of this
Yeah,
notice.
it's 90 days.
They ask someone you trust to help you, and then it does say that if you would like an expedited fair hearing, you can ask for within 10 days.
Yeah.
So it lists a couple of different dates.
So it's just,
Doesn't feel like it's hard language. I mean, like, it feels like it's soft language to me, but
I know, like, I have clients that don't know what the word appeal really, like, means on an everyday basis, so for them to understand, like.
I think that's fine. We just want to make sure it's on there, and I think that there's, the problem probably happens on the phone call more often. So maybe a training issue, but. There's other pieces in there. It doesn't sound like that part of it would be a problem with departments, it's already there.
Yeah, so I think maybe, and the language is just a little awkward. So are you all kind of okay with removing that piece and working with the department, I think sometimes things can just be like making the department aware of like, oh, this is what's happening in phone calls. I'm not sure.
But there's the other parts of the appeal process, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about that one.
I do think we should leave in there, that their right to appeal, they don't have to decide at that time, and most importantly, all organizations that with contact information that they can reach out to about an appeal. I feel like that's the hardest part for an applicant is finding that.
And the reason I said organizations that take new applicants that represent people in fair hearings is because there are shelter organizations that like might represent someone, but that's not what they do. But we do that, and Legal Aid does that. We'll do it with not as someone who's new.
I'm gonna suggest that we pause conversation. We have about 9 minutes left here. And I think it's important for us to make a plan about our last meeting.
Yeah, so we had December 10th, had been on the calendar. Look back at that. I know there were some folks that wouldn't work for, or the timing was an issue. Frank, I see your hands.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, I think we're gonna need an all-day meeting, like potentially even longer than today. And I just had like a process question. I'm wondering, so the document that we had sent out yesterday that incorporated like all the feedback Sarah had taken from the last meeting, plus the recommendations that Brenda had lifted up in previous meetings. I didn't include, like, HHAV has a couple of other thoughts, but I didn't incorporate anything that we hadn't discussed publicly. And I'm wondering if it would be okay if we kind of turn that, if we and submit it to one person. I'm happy for it to come to me if folks want to do that, but like everyone just incorporate in any recommendations they have, and maybe we set a deadline of like end of, I know next week's Thanksgiving, so maybe like December 2nd or 3rd, to get it to whoever. And I'm happy for it to be me, and I turn it around in like a day and give everyone like a solid week to look at everything. And maybe we get into the next meeting and can like start with like consensus questions, like, can we go through these? Are there any, and so we can like just quickly narrow down the list of where we don't have consensus, and kind of work that way next meeting.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good plan, Frank. I think we can get the setting a deadline for the recommendations to be submitted seems reasonable. I think, yeah, I think that December 2nd is a good deadline. And then we can aim to have, compiled all of those into, one place and send out on the 3rd. So that, yes, then everybody has a full week to kind of review. I also think that's important because we have wanted to have some additional expanded public comment on this report, and it will be important to kind of put something out there that has, kind of encompasses the recommendations too. So I think that I would support that.
Do you want me, because I know you've done most of the work so far, you and Berkeley, do you want me to take?
Can you hear us?
Oh,
Oh,
now
sorry.
we can, Lily.
Okay. I think well, I don't know, were you feeling the same way, but I'm feeling like so first of all, it seems like there was 50% of people cannot extend the meeting on the 10th based on the survey. So I just think that's like a reality. And then it also seems like there's a lot of material that we just did not even get to today based on what already has been shared. And it just seems like, I feel like we need to make some decisions around, do we try to use that prioritization list and only add in for a few things? Do we identify maybe we're not going to give recommendations on other things? It just feels a little overwhelming to like at the last meeting throw the doors really wide open. And I also know that people are super passionate, and I don't want to like minimize the conversation. I just feel like, I think to your point, Frank, like today was 6 hours. We can only reasonably get through so much and allow people the time to like ask questions. I mean, especially when it's things that we've never talked about as a group, it feels really overwhelming to suddenly add in. And so I'm just like really wrestling with that, because the report is due to the legislature, I think January 15th. And so in addition to just like making a decision they're the holiday, like, it then has to be written, and we haven't even talked about that or what that's gonna look like and how people are gonna then be able to veto or make edits. So,
Also just wanna, cause I was reading through it, there's a lot of, I think Sarah and I can meet and go through, because there's a lot of, and that's why it's hard to navigate, is there's a lot of repeating things, just stated different ways. And so we're gonna have to be less, worried about language and just make sure themes. But I think that will, like, if you actually, like, it feels like a really long document, but reading through it, it's a lot of it is like 4 paragraphs of people saying very similar things, but so I think Sarah and I will have to execute some of our privilege as chair going forward, and being less consensus building and getting people's opinions on how we navigate the rest of the time, and using our positions as chair to make some kind of executive decisions. And then having, ultimately having votes, but doing that to weed through some of what we have before us. Because I also have another committee and a whole other report I also have to write.
I thought some of us couldn't even do the 10th, so I don't know if we were thinking of changing the date anyways. I do think that has to be, I don't think we're gonna get this done in 2 hours. So I think Frank is correct. And there was a question I had, something. Oh, the recommendations that have already been given to everybody. There's no reason why people can't look at them and ask, individuals can ask any of us that wrote them questions. I mean, we certainly, I'm happy to bring it back to, or forward it to someone who they can read it to me. And try to have this, like, that's not breaking any open meeting law to add for individuals to ask me questions about any recommendations that we have brought forth. And we're happy to do that. We'll also look and see how it can be, any language that we have presented could be shortened, and happy to send that around. So we'll do that, but there was something else that Frank said. I was like, oh, I know. Can we not have it be whatever the deadline, could it not be the 3rd? Because the second, it was the 2nd. So like, could we have it be the 3rd or the 4th? Because there's a huge transition happening of people entering shelter, and we are completely bombarded until that day, until December 1st, and that'll really be December 2nd, because it's a Monday.
Brenda, I'm gonna ask that if you have any additional recommendations, that you send them to Jubilee and I instead of to the group, because I worry that it kind of confuses things, because sometimes when I see things come out from you, I'm like, oh, is this new, or is this something that we've already incorporated into the document? So I think that what we're working toward right now is to have everything in one place. So I would request that anybody who has additional recommendations to submit, that they submit those to myself and Jubilee at this point going forward. So then we can make sure everything's like in one place, if that makes sense. And then my other question, Lily and Nicole, we haven't seen recommendations from the administration. Is that something that we can expect? Or I guess I'm just wanting to understand like what your role is with this. The room's muted.
you just missed it. I solved everything.
Yes, you did.
No, I mean, I think that it's an interesting question, Sarah. I mean, I think maybe it's a process misunderstanding. I mean, I think we have not necessarily been operating that there would be like these separate recommendations. And again, maybe that's why I'm sort of struggling, and maybe other people have just sort of had this other like out of group sense that people are, but that really we'd be talking about things. And then I think again, like when we've tried to talk or ask questions about things like budget, people have sort of said they don't want to talk about that. So I I mean, I think we really looked at this as the group would be kind of discussing and that things are not happening like behind the scenes.
They're
then
not,
separate.
there's nothing that's happening behind this. Oh, sorry, Lily, I thought you were done.
Yeah, no, so again, I just think from a process perspective, I don't think we were operating under the assumption that there would be then separate recommendations.
I don't necessarily know that it's separate, it's just recommendations in general. Like, I think
Ideas.
anybody could come to the table with ideas, like, some of us have just kind of spitballed on our own, or like, some of the meetings when we initially started, like, were eaten up by technology challenges
Yeah.
or whatever, and so,
Totally.
and like,
I mean-
or just like other conversations, and so it was like, some of us were like, hey, let's talk about this, and like, you got ideas, I got ideas, or people come up with ideas on their own. I think it was like, how do you revision something that like isn't really working, but is really essential? And so like, you know, like any ideas are welcome, and just like, maybe that's not a place, like, we didn't talk about the budget because like, nobody said you need to come up with recommendations and a cost for it too. Like, we can argue that in the legislature depending on the cost to navigate that, but like, what, like, there's a lot of problems we're trying to solve, like, what would make the program better for the population that we're serving?
But I think what you just described, and again, is I think what we've talked about in other meetings, and I guess maybe I thought we had sort of, there was an understanding at that meeting, maybe it was like 2 meetings ago, where like, we can't really engage, it's hard for us to engage without talking about costs. And so if that's sort of a decision of the group of like, we're not gonna then talk about budget implications, or we're not gonna talk about like personnel implications, like, that's really hard for us to then
I think all the, like,
participate in other way, other than just kind of giving technical expertise.
but we can't talk
And
about the
so-
budget because we're not
Folks, we're gonna
CFOs.
get kicked out very shortly once they realize we're still in this
Yeah.
round, except for me, I get to stay. So I think, Sarah, I'm just gonna suggest Sarah and I will come together and send out a doodle poll in the next day or two around possible days for the final meeting, and we'll get that scheduled ASAP and take it from there. Is that okay? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
Thanksgiving. I almost said hallelujah.